Hello, gang. It's Professor McElroy, Graphic Design 1, Learning Module 2, Week 2 of our session. Really good job on Learning Module 1. Remember, Graphic Design 1 class is kind of the umbrella class that gives you the basics of the 3 primary applications for designers. Week 1 is Photoshop, Week 2 is Illustrator, and Week 3 is InDesign. And your book really does start with some very granular basic elements for each of the 3 software applications. And also remember, this is one of a triptych. So it's Graphic Design 1, 2, and 3. So when you bundle those together, it's about 12 weeks or so of just graphic design best practices, basic software applications. Once you learn a little bit about Photoshop and Illustrator and InDesign, it really does help with the Adobe CC overall understanding of the structure of the bundle, each software application, kind of the generalized understanding of the toolbar, because a lot of them have similar symbols or tools in multiple applications, and also how the properties menu works, some of the things you need in Adobe CC. I know when I look at the cohort, each of you have had some kind of software specific class, whether it's Dreamweaver, whether it's Animate, or one of the kind of just software specific classes, but this is a really good class for getting the generalized umbrella skill set of what a graphic designer does. So really good job week 1. It was basic Photoshop. Remember, raster base, pixels, manipulating pixels. Remember, everything's tied to 100% output, which means whatever size image you're working on is the size image of output. And it's best used for photo manipulation. That's why they call it Photoshop. Adobe Classroom and a Book books are the ones we're using for each of the 3 graphic design level courses. So I call it like introductory, kind of basic, then like a little bit more intermediate, and then advanced really as we kind of navigate through the book. Created by the Adobe designers, tied to a software certification. So it's the right process for learning. I'm sure some of you have been exposed to the programs before, and maybe you're a little bit self-taught, but really take into account the lecture process and also the process your book teaches you while we navigate through this coursework, because it really is the best practice. I spent a lot of time through emails, through showing, through screen work, breaking down maybe the not best ways to do it, which some people have learned over the years of tinkering in the software and trying to break it down, getting back to the fundamental elements of the software and what we're trying to do, which is produce a professional output as a designer using the appropriate software application. So needless to say, Photoshop was week 1. Learning module 2 is Adobe Illustrator. And Illustrator is by far my favorite program. Hands down, not even close. And it's because I was a doodler when I was younger, and I took doodling to drawing. I took drawing to digital drawing, and I took digital drawing to brand development. So that's one of my fortes as a designer over the many, many years. I build brands, and my brands are what are called combination marks, which means there's text and images associated with any brand that I develop for any product or service. So I really like to doodle and draw in Illustrator because it's a vector program. That's the program you should be using for anything that needs to be scalable. So that means logos, spot illustrations, graphics that might end up being billboards or really large images like vehicle graphics. Anything that needs to be scaled up should really have a vector application. It doesn't mean that you can't use a photograph, do some pixel manipulation, bring it into Illustrator, and they will blow it up for you for a vehicle graphic. Yes, but if you walk up to that vehicle, you're going to notice the difference between a photograph printed and wrapped in that vehicle and a vector graphic printed and wrapped in that vehicle. That's why you'll notice in Southwest Florida, we're surrounded by service industry, right? All kinds of service industry. Take a look at those vehicles driving around. 90% of them are illustrated graphics, which means they're doodles, cartoons, silhouettes, graphics that can be scaled. The reason that's important is because they use a DuPont sticker process, which means they take it to Illustrator, they scale it up, they print it to a sticker that matches the color spectrum of the illustration on the computer, they die cut it out, and they apply it to the vehicle. It has to be scalable. Remember when I told you in week 1, when you zoom into curves, they have the color that steps around the edge. It isn't a clean line. Well, imagine that as a sticker trying to print that. Yes, there are big full color printers now where you can print a photograph really big on a sticker because it's like an inkjet computer printer that you have at your home, but it's really large format and it prints to the sticker as an image and it's peeled off and wrapped on the vehicle. But the amount of resolution required to have an image that's 10 feet by 8 feet on the side of a vehicle is very, very, very big. Doesn't mean that phones aren't getting completely ridiculous. And I think I saw something the other day that Samsung or someone's tinkering around with a 50 megapixel camera. Like, oh my gosh. I mean, it's been many, many years since I was in school, but I tell you, they were bragging about 3 megapixel cameras not too long ago. And now they're dealing with 50 megapixel cameras. So just keep that in mind. Packaging design, cereal boxes, vehicle graphics, billboards, t-shirt illustrations, all these things that need to be printed out in a scalable environment are created in a vector program. And everyone's going to be like, I love to draw, but I love to draw in Procreate. Procreate is great. Every lecture I ever do in every class, I say Adobe is the industry standard, but there's lots of applications out there that you can do other things in that are equally as impressive. And Procreate is one of them. I have many, many students that use their iPad or Samsung Galaxy. They use their little stylus. They draw on the screen because it's way easier than the mouse. They produce an illustration, and that illustration is for professional output. But I have to tell you, if it's for professional output and it has to be scaled up, it has to be brought into Illustrator and vectorized. It's the only way to do it. So I've had students draw murals that were 10 feet by 10 feet for me for different projects we've done in class. And the only way they could be printed out to be applied in a panel environment in large format was to vectorize their Procreate drawing, because they use Photoshop brushes in Procreate. And Photoshop brushes are raster based, even though Procreate is a vector and raster program all in one. So just know that Photoshop is for pixels, Illustrator is for vector graphics. So Illustrator is the place to go if you're trying to create something scalable. And first and foremost, just think logos. So many designers early on in their career, or when they're trying to do design but aren't professionally trained, create logos in Photoshop. That's a bad idea because they're not scalable. Even the text has a pixel edge. So just know as you're learning, Photoshop, scalable graphics, Illustrator. And so I love Illustrator. I use my iPad all the time to draw with my stylus versus the mouse. I use Adobe Illustrator, which used to be Adobe Draw. So the beauty about that is when you open it up and save it, it saves to the cloud. And once you open Illustrator on your computer, you can open up the drawing you created on your iPad and manipulate it in Illustrator on your computer too. So I can work away from my computer setup in my office, doodle for clients, work on preliminary sketches, build frameworks, go into my iMac in my home office, go into Illustrator, click on my cloud, immediately pull that file down, and there's no manipulation or adjustment. It's exactly the same file. It's vector based. So just know Adobe plays really well together. You pay a premium for it, but it plays really well together. And as technology evolves, the programs evolve too. I actually put an announcement in this class, and it really has nothing to do with the software of this class. It's just an interesting evolution of Adobe CC. After Effects and Premiere are using AI now. So when you post videos, it scrapes the transcript from the video, and it's now searchable and taggable. So you can go in, find the exact moment in the video in the transcript of where you say a certain word, and it will stop on the timeline at that point in the movie, and you can drop the text straight from your transcript into the screen, and you don't have to drag the timeline back and forth to find the exact point. It's like already starting to learn for you. So just be aware that this AI, that's the evolution of Adobe. I mean, it's gonna be crazy. You're gonna have an idea for a collage. You're gonna grab a bunch of images in Photoshop. You're gonna type in what you want it to look like, and it's not gonna be too far away, and Photoshop's gonna compose it for you. It's gonna already cut the images out and compose it for you. So creativity is gonna be a premium because the software is learning. And as the software learns, it gets better. And keep in mind that there are hundreds and hundreds of designers that work on these programs every single day. So you have to believe if you thought about something you wanted to do with the program, there's already been a lot of people that thought about something to do with the program that's exactly the same as yours. So if they can think it, it becomes a filter, it becomes an AI process, it becomes a thing that you will already be able to do. I mean, just YouTube it. If you have an idea of something in Photoshop, type it in YouTube. There's a how-to already, probably 50 of them on the exact thing you're thinking about that someone has done a step-by-step process for. So AI is coming. We were talking about that Chat GPT today. I mean, people are using Chat GPT to make their own LinkedIn professional profile images. They're just uploading casual pictures and the thing is re-rendering them in a clean background with a suit, turns your face to the right spot, hits the lighting the right way. So I've actually thought about updating mine to that just so I could see what it looks like and figure out if anyone catches on or not. It's going to be the perfect picture created by someone else with my likeness, which I really love. Maybe they'll make me 6 foot tall. That would be pretty cool. So, okay. So that brings us into Adobe Illustrator. So let's go into actually, let's go into the announcement because I put a little Tony the Tiger image, which is a vector graphic, although it's a Photoshop file because I downloaded it. And we're going to use it to talk about the process with Illustrator and how it works. So I'm going to save this image, which is a PNG. I'm going to dump it on the desktop. Save that. And there it is out on the desktop. And just though Learning Module 2 is our Illustrator module, and it's some very, very basic Illustrator processes from your book. I mean, super easy step-by-step stuff. So we're going to spend our time doodling a little bit in Illustrator so we can talk about some of the key things your book talks about, which are kind of like best practices when you actually get into the program. So that's a really important thing. So let's get in to Illustrator. I'm going to create a new document. I'm just going to create a basic 8.5 by 11. My Tony the Tiger is a tall image up and down. And so I'm going to use portrait instead of landscape. I'm not putting any bleeds or anything on it. That's something to talk about in another class, another day. Remember, print quality is CMYK, resolution is 300 DPI or PPI, which means 100% output, but do know that it's scalable graphics we're creating. So whatever we create, we'll be able to blow up as big as we want or make them as small as a pinhead, a stamp, whatever you want to say for size. Like that's the beauty about Illustrator. I could spend all day and all night doodling in Illustrator because whatever I create, I can apply to absolutely anything I would ever need to do in design, which is a really awesome thing to feel. Sometimes I create something Photoshop for a client and I was like, well, this is great, but you can only use it 8.5 by 11 or smaller. And it's like, are you kidding me? If I create an Illustrator, it's like, what do you want to use it for? You want to put it on the side of a building, 60 foot by 60 foot? Let's do it. Right? Because you can. I mean, that's just the nature of the beast. I also love to draw. So that's one of the keys with the old Adobe Illustrator. So I'm going to go in and file place. We're going to talk about some different things in the program here, kind of as we get going. So I'm going to take this file place. I'm just going to drag a container, kind of hold this thing. So there he is. Here's my Tony the Tiger. I'm just going to kind of drop him in. He's a little too big for my document. So I'm going to do a little shift option, make him a little bit smaller. You can already see that he's a little pixelated. And the reason he's a little pixelated is because he's a PNG. He is not a scalable graphic. But I will tell you, I'm going to describe the breakdown of this thing. And you're going to quickly see that everything in this shape was created in Illustrator, which is really smart because Tony the Tiger needs to be the size of a float, like, right, huge thing. And also it has to be itty bitty so that he can advertise his cereal on another cereal, or they could put it on anything that they could possibly, from a keychain to whatever. So it's critical that you create things. And you'll be able to tell very quickly what's a vector graphic as you start to learn a little bit about the process, because it is easily recognizable by the stroke quality of the shapes that you're creating. So, all right, so here we are. We're got old Tony the Tiger here. I did file place. When I did file place, I just drew a container box. If you've dabbled around in any programs that are desktop based that have linked images, you know that containers are boxes with X's that you place images inside of. So if you ever used any programs that are multi-page in nature, where it combines text and images all in one location, Illustrator is no different. I just drew a container box when I did file place to make sure that I place it in at the scale I want in my document. and know that I'm on layer number 1. So I'm just going to rename this by double clicking it, template layer, right? This is my template layer. Now, when I select something, just like in Photoshop, that something has properties. Remember, the properties ran along the top of the screen in Photoshop. In Illustrator, they are a palette or a tab over here on the right-hand side. So the first thing I'm going to do, because I'm using this to draw, I'm going to draw on top of this thing. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to soften the opacity of this image. And you should know from the layers palette in Photoshop when we were lecturing last week, opacity is the amount of light that shines through any given object or layer, depending on the program you're in. Well, 100% opacity means there's no light whatsoever shining through it. As I lighten this number, 80%, 70%, 60%, light is allowed to interact with the image and soften it, or watermark it is what we call. You'll notice it's a white background, which is a beautiful thing, because as I change this opacity, it interacts with the background color, artboard color. And if it was a different color, it would tint this image as I change the opacity in it. But because it's white, it's just going to soften it. So let's just see what 50% looks like. 50% is pretty good, but I'm going to go down even more to 30%. So you're noticing that I'm just using this as a watermark. Students use them as templates, areas they can draw on top of. You can do this on your iPad using any drawing program, place an image, make it the bottom layer, and draw right over the top of it. You obviously can do it in Illustrator. You can do it in Photoshop if you wanted. You make your image layer a 30% opacity, you add a new layer and pick the paintbrush tool, and you could doodle right over the top of it. Some students do that because it's how they learn proportions, perspective, basic drawing. You don't really have to know how to draw well. This is not a figure drawing class. You do not have someone standing in the room that you're trying to draw the figure of. You're using programs. And so programs have lots of ways to do things. So you can use things as templates and create original things over the top. So if I'm doing a mascot, I could download a picture of a tiger, use the tiger as a watermark, use my pencil, my paintbrush, my pen tool, and draw the proportion of the tiger on top of the photo of the tiger, and then manipulate scale proportion, use effects, warp it, bulge it, arc it, do different things to it, and it becomes original art. So I use illustrations in this class as templates because it's how you learn vector. Like, this is the easiest way to teach you vector because we're dealing with a vector image that we need to vectorize. And so it's a really easy way to learn. So, okay. So when I place my image, you'll notice there's some actions down here. If this says embed and not unembed, it means there's a link to the image you placed in Illustrator. Make sure you embed that image. So you click on this and there's no X across this image. It's just a container, a bounding box, because the beauty about technology now is these images aren't that big and you don't have to link in Illustrator. Embed all the images you're drawing on top of, doodling with, playing with, because you don't need that image once you place it in. The beauty is I now don't need the image on the desktop. All I need is my Illustrator file. So before I go any further, I'm going to do a file save as. I'm going to name it Tony illustration.ai, save it to my desktop. Know that .ai is the Illustrator source file. When you're working in design, you always have to have access to the layers, the properties, the objects in your file. Do not get rid of PSD files, AI files, any of the source files in Adobe CC. You're going to need them. And I know you can save a PDF in Photoshop, and as long as you keep the layers box checked in the PDF settings, you'll have access to the layers if you open it up again. But do know, based on the format of the PDF you're saving, those pixels can be manipulated in the exporting of that file. They can compress them. They could expand them a little bit. So you want the source file. So never get rid of PSD, AI, INDD files, DWT files for Dreamweaver. You need those files. You need the data that's collected in the source file. And I'll say that, and someone will draw a beautiful illustration. They'll save it as an EPS or PNG. They'll send it off to our client, or they'll upload it as a project. And they'll say, hey, can you modify this thing in the image? And you'll be like, oh no, I opened it up in Illustrator and it's flattened. I don't have access to all the parts I created. Don't get rid of the parts. Always save the Illustrator file. Okay, So once I select that, my properties window changes, just like it does in Photoshop, right? When you do something in Photoshop, you select the layer or the object, the property windows are different based on the object you have selected. The quick actions is a really good place to look when you're trying to figure out exactly what your next best move might be. You can also right click in any Adobe program and it will give you this prompt window. The prompt window is always a good place to look for like things immediately that you might want to do with the object. Remember, I told you hundreds and hundreds of designers are working on these software applications every single day. This right click prompt window is something they're adjusting all the time. So just know that you can always right click with your selection arrow in order to do something in any of the Adobe CC programs. All right, I'm going to go over now and I'm going to add a new layer because I'm going to call this new layer color overlay, because that's going to be my layer for when I start adding some color to this thing. Okay, and then my next layer I'm going to call line art. And my line art layer is where I'm going to do the outline for the illustration. It's very easy in Illustrator to have everything on one layer. The beauty about Photoshop is when you copy and paste something, you manipulate it, it creates a new layer. Illustrator does not. Every object you place, you create, you draw, you import goes onto one layer unless you make another layer. Best practice, I'm going to tell you right now, is to have multiple layers. One for template, one if you're doing any kind of colorization, overlay, and always some kind of line art layer. That's a really good way to separate your elements, especially in spot illustration. Now, you'll see the little eyeballs over here is what is visible. The box next to it is lock. I'm going to lock my template layer because I don't want to be able to move Tony the Tiger. And I'm going to lock my color overlay layer because I want to do line art first. Line art first. Now, all right, so we have our basic file set up. This is a really good best practice when you're creating an Illustrator, is determine background, middle ground, and foreground. So in essence, I'm doing that with a template layer, a color overlay, and a line art layer. And I always like to have a color overlay layer because my line art layer sometimes is just a doodle of the outline. So when I go back into color, I've got some closed shapes, maybe some open shapes, just depends on the style I'm trying to draw. I say this in every file a student gives me, I would say 80% of them are all on one layer. So just know best practices. I'm talking as I'm recording lectures and I'm posting them in the announcement section. Try to train your brain, short key commands, best practices, what software applications are for, get the wheels turning for design, thinking about what you might want to do with these programs or what program is best based on what your client is asking for. But until you practice some of this stuff too, it's kind of that practice makes near perfect, right? You start getting a groove and finding things and kind of figuring out how you work. That's certainly going to help as well. I'm going to go ahead and minimize my palettes because I'm going to go over here to the toolbar. And I'm only going to talk about a few tools. I'm only going to talk about a few tools because we're going to basically be dealing with shapes and paintbrush and pencil and the pen tool when you start to learn the basics of Adobe Illustrator, right? The beauty about Illustrator is you're drawing a shape with a stroke and a fill. Now, the first thing I'm going to talk about is these little color swatches down the bottom of your toolbar. Down here in the lower corner, the front box, top left is fill. The bottom box, top right is stroke. Every shape has a fill and a stroke when you create an Illustrator. The only difference is you have the option to not have a fill or not have a stroke, and it's that little red dash line that goes through the box. So you can always choose not to have a stroke or not to have a fill, but the option is there. It's really important. Every object you create has a smooth outer edge. No pixels, no stepping, nice closed shape of fill and stroke. First thing, very important. Now, second thing, you have your global selection arrow or selection tool, and you have your direct select tool. Remember, when you create a shape in Illustrator, there's a stroke and a fill, and that stroke and fill is determined by what are called nodes, little points, right? You can select the whole shape you created with the selection arrow. You can select individual points any place the line changes direction in the thing you're drawing using your direct select. Really important to understand that both of those properties are important. Now, the next best tool in the toolbar, the one that you should really fall in love with, and it takes practice, practice, practice to get good at, is the pen tool. The pen tool is where many designers, most designers, create their finished line art for their vector drawing. The reason they do is because the line is controlled by a Bezier curve, and the line is super smooth, super clean, and really perfect. Now, doesn't mean the paintbrush or the pencil tool isn't a great tool, because there is a place for free form drawing. And if you ever go to communication arts, or I'll post all kinds of illustration styles in the digital illustration class, the individual class about Illustrator, because there's lots of ways to draw with a digital illustration brush. You can loosely sketch with pencils and paintbrushes, or you can graphically draw with the pen tool. And that's a key term, graphically draw, which means smooth line art, smooth shapes, and really good artwork for printing in an environment where sometimes the shapes might need to be cut out. I don't know if you ever noticed, but most branding illustrations, the symbols of the combination mark, are pen tool closed shapes, because who knows when you're going to need to have to cut the logo out of something, wood, metal, a sticker, right, vinyl. So you need to have a firm edge. It can't be a loose doodle edge in order for you to be able to cut that thing out. So, and if the illustration is loosely doodled, like paintbrush and pencil, then they put it inside of shape, a shield, a circle, a rectangle, whatever, a diamond, because that shape is what the hard edge is, and what's inside is the doodle. So just kind of keep that in mind. The pen tool, you should practice a lot and try to fall in love with, because this is the tool for vector drawing that's really, really important. And then there's a basic shape tool, rectangle, ellipse, stars, line segment, very basic shapes. I only use them for stripes and circles and rectangles to put something in a box. Mostly everything I do is the pen tool, or at times I may use a loose drawing tool like the pencil. So I'm going to take the pen tool here really quick. The rest of these are tools as we evolve in Illustrator, we will lean on more heavily. The gradient tool, the eyedropper, the text tool, the rotation and scale tool, all different, but these top ones are the really important ones. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'll throw the text tool in there. So top 7 are really important. So before I go any further, I'm just going to go into my line art layer, and I'm going to go over here on the paste board. This is called the art board, and this is called the paste board, which is in the gray. Different than Photoshop, I can draw from the art board over to the paste board. And I can actually still see the shape on the artboard and the paste board. Unlike Photoshop, this is cut off. You can't see anything over here. Now you'll notice I have a fill and I have a stroke. My fill currently is white, so I'm going to use I'll go into my color palette, and I'm just going to pick like an orange. And my stroke, I'm going to make black, just so that you can see the difference. So I'm going to deselect for a minute, and I'm going to zoom in. And you're going to see that this shape has a fill and a stroke. Now, when I use my direct select tool and I click on just a corner, everywhere this shape changes direction has what's called a node. And the node is the point where something goes from one direction to another direction. And these are really important to understand, because these are what you need to be comfortable manipulating in order to draw effectively in Illustrator. Now, when I use direct select on some of my points, you're going to see a line going out this way and a line going back this way. These are called directional anchors. So this directional anchor controls the arc of the line going forward, and this directional anchor controls the arc of the line going backwards. So every pinpoint that is used by clicking and dragging your mouse creates what's called a node with directional anchors. You'll notice these other ones, I clicked my mouse and let go, and clicked my mouse and let go, and did not drag, and I created straight lines which have no directional anchors. So you can see the difference. So let's do that again. Watch when I just tap my mouse and let go. I'm drawing some version of a straight segmented line. Now watch when I click and drag and pull, I create a line with a directional anchor. So see, as I pull away, deeper arc. As I pull closer, flatter line. As I rotate clockwise, deeper arch at the bottom. When I concave versus convex, when I arc this way, line arcs the other way. The nature of creating a Bezier curve is the challenges of vector drawing. The ability to understand how much you pull left, right, top, and bottom as you hold your mouse down controls the smoothness, in essence, of the line. Now, Illustrator's gotten really smart over the years. This did not used to be a thing. See how it's already telling me the direction the new line is going to go without me even having to click my mouse down? This is a smart guide. So this thing is telling me this directional anchor, which is the forward directional anchor, is going to make your line arc this far out. And as you go this way, bigger arc. As you go this way, deeper concave. It's the nature of how the pen tool works. Now, that's a really great kind of feature that Illustrator has gotten over the years. Before, you just had to know that it was going to start out this much of an arch based on how far I pull my mouse as I'm holding it down when I'm dropping my node into the document. So as I click and drag, look at how the line changes. So I have my mouse held down. So this thing is just curving based on how my mouse is held down with my directional anchor. So if I pull it this way, I get a wave. If I pull it this way, I get a mound. Like the mouse is, the line's controlled by this forward anchor. The closer I get, the flatter I get. The further I pull out, the bigger arc I get. So this is the art of what you're doing. And your book does a really good job of giving you little practices and processes of how to create things using the pen tool in an environment that is controlled by the Bezier curve. So I'm actually going to make a funky shape here. So I'm going to go this way so you can see that it actually starts out. And then as I pulled this down, it dips down and steeply goes up. Now, you'll notice when I move my mouse, it starts to curve again. And yes, this is how everyone starts pulling their hair out, is because they don't understand, man, I drew too long of a line. So when I start my next line, it's already curving too far from the arc that I want it to be because I made this line so long. I used to give challenges where I would give a shape and I would tell the students, the person that does the shape in the fewest amount of pen points gets 100%. And everyone that uses an extra node gets a point subtracted for every extra node. But then it started to be a bit of a war because everyone was trying to draw a shape in 3 dots, which unless you're drawing a triangle, that's really hard to do in 3 dots. So the key is the less the nodes, the better. And you don't want to go click, 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 click a million times with the points. Yes, you might get a better shape, but the ability to manipulate that shape if you need to means you have to select all those nodes in order to manipulate it. The less points, the less nodes you have to direct select if you need to make an adjustment. So that is the art you're dancing. If you ever bring a photo in and vectorize it, it makes every single shape, every grouping of pixel in the photograph a separate node. And you'll bring an image in and do what's called live trace it, and you'll have thousands of nodes in one simple image of a strawberry. When in theory, the strawberry could have been drawn probably in a half dozen shapes, and each shape has like 6 or 7 points in it. So your key, your trick is to create this thing in as few nodes as possible. And you can always tell the level of illustration comfort a student has based on the number of nodes. When they're new to the program and they're new to digitally drawing, I get simple rabbit silhouettes with 8,000 points in them. By the time they get to 2,000 level class, 3,000 level class, they can draw that thing in 10 points. I mean, it's just the nature of getting comfortable with the pen tool over practice, practice, practice to get it to the point where this thing is a perfectly smooth shape. It looks great. And there aren't 8,000 nodes that made up the shape. Because remember, every point has to be direct selected when you want to manipulate that point. So the more you have, the more you have to direct select in order to adjust them. So now I'm going to show you a little trick as you start learning to draw. because when you start learning to draw, you're thinking kind of less about all these directional anchors, and you're thinking more about just trying to make a pretty smooth line and not have 8,000 points to make it. So watch what happens when so I'm going to click and drag my mouse to start this curve, and I'm going to let it go. And now you can see I've got a directional anchor here. I actually have a directional anchor that way. When I use my direct select tool to select that point, I've got a directional anchor this way, and I've got a directional anchor this way. So if I'm clicking and dragging all of my pen lines, I'm having a directional anchor for both sides of the point in every point I put down. Now, when you're starting to learn, I tell the students, a really good way to learn, because you see how this is curving already, and it's really hard for students to get shapes the way they want them, because it's immediately curving the arc of the new line based on the amount of drag you put on the previous line, which means you have to be thinking ahead when you put the line down that you're putting down, already thinking what the next line is going to look like, so that you don't create a curve that makes the next line out of balance with that curve. Now, you can actually go. So watch when I move my mouse down to the center dot, I get an inverted V. I get an inverted V next to the pen tool. The pen tool is actually asking you, do you want to remove the forward directional anchor? Not the anchor back here, but the anchor going this way. Now, well, that's the one controlling the next line, right? Anything I draw already has an arc to it. Watch if I move my mouse down to the center dot or the node of the line I just drew, and I get a reverse V icon. If I click my mouse once, you see the forward anchor, directional anchor got removed. Now watch when I move my mouse, it's a straight line again. It's not a forward directional line. So watch what happens. Click and drag. See how my curve? Watch if I go back and get the inverted V, tap it once, the forward directional anchor is gone. Click and drag, go back to the middle point, remove the forward directional anchor, back to a straight line, click and drag. Now, that makes drawing easier because every line you create isn't already determining the direction of the next line, right? So it makes it a lot easier. But here is where the catch is. So I'm going to go in here and zoom in. Let me pan over here. So you see this thing curves, and then it starts out in a straight line. You can actually see how that's not 100% smooth. It has a curve, a flatness that starts to curve. That is the difference when you remove the forward anchor when you're trying to match two curve lines together. It creates this little dimple in the illustration. I got to be honest with you, there's a hawk in our hallway that drives me crazy. The Hodges hawk, if you actually look at the really big one that's blown up on the wall, has a hiccup in the line of the curve of the neck, which means the designer that drew it removed the forward anchor and started the curve again with another directional anchor. So they did not use two Bezier curve points together in order to create the arc. It has an indent like that in it. Only I would notice that because I have a super OCD type A personality, but you can see it right here. Yes, that line does look good, except it has a slight hiccup right here where it's flat because I removed the forward anchor before I started the next line. It is a good way to learn to draw when you're learning to draw. See how this curves and then it flattens out before it curves again? Well, this will be perfectly fine for a neck that meets the chin of a person. So from a learning how to draw with less points process, removing the forward anchor as you draw is perfectly appropriate. But you will learn as you're drawing and using this technique how far I can draw a line and pull a curve before I have to start a new node and line, because you're going to quickly realize where the wrinkles are in your illustration when you're drawing using this technique. But it is a good technique for learning how to draw. And there are times when you're drawing a curve and it needs to meet a straight. Like when you're drawing fingers, the finger curves, but the little valley where the finger meets the hand before the next finger starts, oftentimes is a V. It's a dot going now the next direction. You can look at Mickey Mouse's gloves. I mean, you can look at so many things. Tony the Tiger has some spots too, where his hand knuckles meet the next finger knuckle and they remove the directional anchor because it's changing directions. Like it's actually going in a V or a different direction. So it is perfectly appropriate to remove that anchor point, directional anchor point, as you're kind of working and drawing and creating, just to learn. I don't remove those directional anchors anymore because I'm really good with the pen tool and I know how far I have to pull a line and how far I can go before I have to start a new line. Now, the last part about the pen tool is that when you're creating a shape, a closed shape, you need to go back to where your line started, your first node that you put down on the paper. So you see this little circle that shows next to the pen tool? That's the circle saying, do you want to close this shape? Make it a complete shape. It's really important to make it a complete shape because that means the stroke of the shape starts and ends and it has a complete stroke around the outside of the shape. If you leave this short, then this area of the image does not have a stroke because the shape hasn't been connected. Once it's connected, it has a complete fill and a complete stroke. If you do not connect the shape and it has a fill color, it draws the straightest line it can from where the dot started for the line and the dot ended for the line and fills it in with color. And that's why you get a weird straight line going across from one shape to the other. If you don't close it, it's because it does the very best it can to close the shape in a straight line with fill color any way it can based on where you started your line. So when you're creating closed shapes, drawing things in Illustrator, you need to end up where you started. So you'll notice this nose is a closed shape, kind of this blue shape. This is a closed shape. His entire head is a closed shape. His silhouetted body with his hands is a closed shape. So all of this, all the way up here to the top of the finger. That's all one shape. Then all of these line details in the inside of the shape are exactly that, line details in the shape. So this bandana is this entire outer shape, all the way out here, all the way around each knot, all the way down around here, around his neck, all the way back up to the top, and it stops right here where that bandana meets. This line is an additional stroke added later to add depth and detail to the shape. So think about it in black and white. Don't think about colors, gradients, details, wrinkles, creases. Think about it just in closed shapes. Obviously, the eyes are closed shape, each one of them. Even this little white dot is a closed circle. They're all closed shapes. And that's the best for scalability. That's the best. Remember, DuPont stickers, stamping in metal, cutting out of wood. You need closed shapes to make those things. They have to be silhouettes. They might be silhouettes in a million different colors layered on top of each other to make a finished image, but they are closed shapes. This little crease in the palm is a line, pen tool line that isn't closed. So they clicked here and pulled, made an arc, and that's all the line was. So your book spends a lot of time in the first few chapters of Illustrator just teaching you the pen tool. The pen tool is really important because most of what you create from a graphic standpoint, graphics, bold elements, iconography, logos, symbols, are done with closed, complete shapes. What we call loose drawing or spot illustrations are what you do for doodle sketches that you use for like an illustration for a magazine article. Maybe you doodle a character to put into or support the main brand for a packaging design or something like that. But the granular elements, the main parts of the brand, are made in what we call graphic format, which means they are silhouette or closed shape based. So just know that. Fall in love with the pen tool. Yes, there is other drawing tools like paintbrush and pencil. So you can just free form doodle. This is paintbrush, right? Now you'll notice I haven't let my mouse go, that this thing only has a stroke. right? It only has a stroke because think of it like a paintbrush. If you dip that in paint and doodle with it, there is a stroke, not a fill to it. So you see that it's totally different. Switch to the pencil. And here's the different line weight quality of a pencil to a paintbrush. So you can quickly see the thickness, the roundedness of the paintbrush. Yes, the paintbrush and the pencil have properties which determine the roundness of the brush, the thickness of the stroke. So you can see as I crank up the thickness, but it's exactly what you think it is. It's like dropping a paintbrush on a canvas and dragging and drawing with it versus this pencil, much more fine-tuned. I can beef it up, but look at the end of what a pencil does. It's like a quill pen, right? It has an end cap on it, so you can see the difference. So you can quickly see the jaggedness of this versus the smoothness of this. Pencils and paintbrushes are two different drawing tools because they really do think differently when you're creating something and doodling with a pencil versus a paintbrush, right? When you're doing a sketch as an artist, you use a pencil. It's fine-tuned, it's finite, it has a hard edge, and you're creating what we call a thumbnail sketch or a sketch. When you're actually finishing it, so think about like fill artists, comic book artists, where they're actually adding color to a drawing. There's a line art guy who does the outline in pen, and there's a colorist or a color artist that fills it in. Two different strokes. See that brush rounded like a Sharpie would be. Pencils like a graphite pencil, right? It's got a very hard edge. Totally different from the pen tool where you're creating a fluid shape using a click and drag technique. So I have to tell you, as I've evolved my drawing in my Apple Pencil and my iPad, I use Adobe Draw to draw a lot of illustrations for clients. I use the pencil a whole lot now because I'm drawing like pencil on paper. The only difference is I'm using stylus to glass, which has like no latency drag or anything anymore. So I can literally do what I was doing in my sketchbook on the glass of the iPad and make some really nice illustrations, really beautiful illustrations. But do know that those are all independent lines. They have no fills to them. Even when I fill a shape in using my pencil, I do this, right? If I'm filling a shape in with my Apple Pencil, I'm in essence doing that to fill the shape in. Totally different than a stroke and a fill shape done with the pen tool. But I'm not clicking and dragging with my stylus on my iPad with my Apple Pencil when I'm doing an illustration. I'm filling it in using a layer and doing a eyedropper sample of the stroke color, and I'm just filling it in. It's a loose style of drawing versus a logo, which is much more graphic, or a mascot, which is what this is. This is called a mascot. So this is the sub brand to the cereal specifically for Tony the Tiger. He's not a loose illustration. He is a firm shape drawn graphic illustration. That's because technically he's a sub brand of the cereal, the character, but he needs to be used like he is the primary brand because you're putting him on all kinds of stuff. Think about all the cereal packaging design. Any character that is used to sell a product, it's a pen tool drawing with a closed series of shapes that are layered to create this technique because they have to be very flexible in their use. If you're buying a coffee K-cup and you look at the package design, there may be, a coffee bag with coffee in it, and it might be in a loose illustration. That's a spot illustration for the package design. The character that sells the coffee, that person, that character is bold. It has strokes and fills, and it is a detailed graphic shape. Two different techniques, still trying to get to the same result, which is a scalable graphic. So if I'm doing loose sketches, pencils and paintbrushes are fine. If I'm creating a brand or a sub-brand, something that needs to be very flexible, scaled any size, closed shapes, think of it like stitching on a t-shirt, DuPont sticker cutout for vehicle graphics. If I need to stitch this thing on a shirt, it has to be a closed shape because the shape has to be stitched per the color. So every individual shape in the logo, in the brand, has to be stitched in a color. So hence the other reason the pen tool is so important. I learned the pencil and paintbrush way later. I spent all my time as a designer over the last 25 years learning how to draw with the pen tool. Your book does a great job. It has templates, it has little things, it has you tracing. It really does a good job at teaching you how to use the pen tool. But practice, 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 because as you push your creativity in design, you also want to be able to push your pen tool ability, because you're going to start problem solving solutions that are more complicated shapes. It's just not two shapes. It might be 30 shapes, because look at this thing. The mouth is a shape. The tongue is a shape. The nose is a shape. The nostrils are a shape. The eye is 1, 2, 3 shapes. I mean, everything is layered using multiple shapes. So it makes the process of creating it more complicated, and you have to visualize everything as individual shapes. I started that with the pencil to paper, drawing the outline, drawing the interior shapes from there, filling it in. And I used not a pencil, I used a black ink pen. That's how I learned to draw. So it was finite. Once I did that thing and I picked the pen up from the paper, that was it. I wasn't erasing it. And so I quickly learned how to do things in a very graphic manner where every shape mattered and it was permanent. If I was drawing this line with my pen on paper, I would make that thickness on the outside and then fill it in. And once I did it, it was permanent. Illustrator's made it a lot easier. I can use the pen tool to create this curve and use the line thickness tool and taper the line from thick to thin. And I can do it all very quickly with the drag of a mouse. So we have evolved over time. So let's get into the shape a little bit. We're only going to doodle the head just so that we can start seeing the problem solving aspect of how I need to draw something if I'm going to learn from templatizing processes first before I start to really get comfortable with freehanding or creating something that isn't exactly what I'm following. Your book gives you templates. So everything you're tracing and drawing, from clovers to any clocks or any individual shapes, they're all done using a template or a watermark image to draw on top of. Then when you get comfortable, you start like drawing your own butterflies, drawing your own flowers, simple shapes to start creating things. Now, we're going to start with the nose here. Now, remember, in my layers, I have my template watermark, which is what this image is. I have my color overlay, which is that blue background. And then I have my line art, which is all the outer closed shapes you see. So each ear, the nose, the bridge of the nose, the shape of the head in general, the eyebrows, these are all individual shapes. So I can visualize them already before I even put pen to paper. This mouth, the silhouette of the mouth is a shape. This little curve of the wrinkle of the smile is a shape. This is a shape, that is a shape. This curve out here is a shape. The little dip out from his mouth right here, a shape. Only the interior closed elements of his mouth is an individual or one shape. So I can start breaking down illustrations now and really see what's going on. And you'll also notice that this bridge of his nose curves. So that's 1 point and that's a point. So 2 points to make that line. And then from here to down there is a curved line. I don't know if you notice it, but this thing does have a slight little flattening wiggle there, which means that this line curves and then there's a point and then this line curves. So there's actually 1 point, 2 point, 3 points in order to make this nose shape. So I'm going to switch to my pen tool. I'm in the line art, so I'm only worrying about the outside of the shape, the closed shapes themselves. I'm not worried about any of these creases. I'm not worried about nostrils right now. I'm only worried about the nose of Tony the Tiger. Now, when I'm doing line art, the very first thing I do is I remove the fill and only have a stroke. The reason I don't have a fill when I'm starting to create the closed shapes of my illustration is if I have a fill, every time I click the point down, it fills in the shape. I can't see the shapes behind it. So if I'm creating something based on a template or I'm starting to learn to draw with an image behind it, I can't have a fill when I'm doing the line art because it'll start filling in the shape as I'm drawing it and I can't see the shape behind it. So when I draw, just like I do with pen to paper or stylus to glass on my iPad is, I start with line art, the outline of something, either a loose sketch or something firm. Never, because it's line art, do I have a fill in the shape that I'm trying to draw. So I'm using the pen tool, the pencil, the paintbrush, nothing as a fill. It is stroke only. And you'll see it now as I'm making my drawing. Now, so I have no fill and I have a stroke. Now, I'm going to click my mouse and I'm going to let go, because you're going to notice I put the node right in the middle of the stroke of that shape. See how it's a really thick shape, but I just kind of put the point in the middle. The reason I did that is because every shape stroke, you can control the stroke to be inside the line, outside the line, or in the middle of the line. I'm going to show you what that looks like when I create the nose. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to click in the middle of the stroke, hold my mouse down, and I'm going to pull. Now you're going to see my guide, right? And so now the name of the game is creating this shape so that the line is kind of in the middle of it. So you can see my guide, my green guide, and it's kind of in the middle of that shape. Good enough, I think. So I'm going to let my mouse go. Now, remember, back anchor, forward anchor. Now look at the problem already. When I move my mouse to put the point here, it's already curved way too far outside of the shape that I'm trying to draw. But we call this an elbow, right? This is the corner of a shape where I'm going to start going in a different direction. So I'm going to go ahead to that closed V, right? Inverted V. I'm going to click my mouse once. Now look at the difference. Now I can be much more accurate with how I create the next line. So now I know that this nose has a crease. It has a crease right through the middle. So I want to put the next node right in the middle of my line where that crease is, because now I know if I click and drag, I could probably do a pretty good job of creating the curve for this line that follows kind of the middle of that shape. So I'm going to let go, and there it is. Now look, got a problem again. There's my closed shape right there. So if I close my shape using only 3 dots, I got an arc problem. So I'm going to go back, get the inverted V, click my mouse once, let go. Now when I move my line, I have the ability to control where I'm going to take this next line to. I'm going to hold down my space bar because I'm going to move the document a little bit so you can see where I'm going. So here it is. So now you can see my mouse. I've moved it to the closed circle. It's really important to close your shapes when you're drawing graphic illustrations in Illustrator, because you want to be able to fill them with color. You want to be able to do things with them. And I like to have line art separately. That way I always have the outline of the character, whatever symbol I'm drawing, whatever graphic I'm drawing. And I also have the ability to add the color on the inside. Now, so I'm going to click, hold my mouse down and pull up. And now you're going to see that I'm now curving my line to close it. You're also going to see there's no forward directional anchor because I started that point without clicking and dragging. I started by just clicking the mouse once. Well, if you click and pull them and let the mouse go, there's no forward anchor. So even though I'm moving my mouse, see how there's no green line following my arrow? Because there's no forward anchor in the process. So I'm going to get the line about where I want it. I'm going to let go. Now you're going to see I have a closed shape that I've created in Illustrator, a completely closed shape. Well, this is perfect because this is the beginning of my line art or my graphic character that I'm creating. And the nose is the place I wanted to start. Okay, so now that I have it closed, 2 things you should really use as best practice. First is when you create a shape and it's start to finish and you've closed it, go back to your selection arrow. The reason you go back to your selection arrow is you want to deselect by clicking anywhere. Because if you don't, every little thing you touch, you're going to start drawing new lines, you're going to start selecting things. You don't want to do any of those things. So once you create your first closed shape, when you're doing your illustration, you want to immediately deselect it. The reason you want to deselect it is because now I could go back and use whatever tool I want to create my next thing. It's kind of like when you do a selection in Photoshop. What did I say? Tap somewhere and deselect. Once you created whatever pixel selection, copy, paste, edit, manipulate, filter, blur, drop shadow, whatever you're doing on the layer, deselect it so that you don't do something to those pixels that you didn't want to do when you were doing your selection of pixels in Photoshop. No different in Illustrator. If you're using the pen tool, the pencil, the paintbrush, doesn't matter. Deselect when you're done with your shape, because you're going to want to create a new shape and you don't want to do something to the shape that you might have been like, boy, that was such a great shape. And then somehow I selected it and pulled the Bezier curve angles and anchors, and all of a sudden it's not the shape it used to be. So once you close the shape, deselect it. Now, so I just tap anywhere. If I reselect, you can see this. This is called the bounding box. This tells you the width and the height of the closed shape you created. The bounding box is really important when you use your global selection arrow because it includes scale options and it includes rotation options. So those properties are built in your bounding box for your closed shape. It's also built in the bounding box for a not closed shape. Once you select it, it tries to make a bounding box for you, maximum width, maximum height of your shape. But it's really important because that's the global properties of your shape. You also have your direct select, which allows you to select individual points inside the shape you just drew. Direct select for individual points, global selection to get the bounding box that has scale and rotation built in it. Now, your stroke palette becomes a really important palette in Illustrator because it tells you the properties of the stroke you have selected. So you're going to see a couple of things. One is the weight, right? So the thicker I make it, the thicker I make the stroke. It defaults to 1 point, basic stroke, and it has what's called cap corner properties. Cap meaning if I didn't have a closed shape, anywhere the point ends, it would be flat, rounded, or mid flattened, which means the point actually has kind of a full end to it, extended out versus right to the edge of the node. These little dots are the nodes of your pen, right? Now, it also has the ability to where your node changes direction to make it a hard corner, a rounded miter joint, I guess is the best way to put it, and a bevel joint. So you'll see that. So let's zoom in. So you can see that elbow edge as a corner. You can see it as a rounded corner, and you can see it as a mitered corner. Well, when you get really kind of into design and you're like me, I zoom in, even put the package really close to my face so I can see what the ends are to the line art of whatever's drawn on the packaging design. If it's a can illustration, it's a label. I always look to see what the artist did from a corner standpoint. And you can also choose where it is aligned. See how it's aligned to the center? So it's equally as thick and thin to the inside and the outside of the pen line. Watch what happens if I do on the inside, right? There's my pen line, everything's on the inside. Think of it like a shield in an illustration, like a sports logo or something. Oftentimes the shield has an inside stroke, so you get that crest technique around the shape versus this, which is more just like a nice even stroke weight line when you're drawing it versus outside where that crest becomes stroked on the outside of the shape, kind of like you're taping something and painting it. So just a difference of stroke alignment. Most people draw just on the inside stroke of it because it gives them the most accurate, clean version of their shape. So that gives you the properties of the stroke. Whether it's a closed shape or not, you always have those. Stroke weight, you have the ability to manipulate this shape. Now, I traditionally draw in 1 point because that's a really even stroke. Now, you'll notice in my layers palette, I now have a shape path just for the shape that I drew. Now, and you'll see that shape right there. Now, watch what happens if I go to draw this curved line inside my nose. So I'm actually going to take my pen tool now. I'm actually going to deselect first. I'm going to take my pen tool and watch when I move my line to draw my new line over the nose that I've already drawn. See how it highlights it? It tells me that it's on that line. So when I move it, it highlights it. Well, that's a really important feature because I'm probably going to want the crease of the nose to start right at the middle of this line. I'm going to click and let my mouse go. And I'm going to go down here, see how it's the middle again? Click and drag. And I've just created the seam for that line. Now, look, it wants to continue to close the shape. I don't need to close the shape on that line because it's just a crease. So I'm going to go back to my selection arrow and I'm going to deselect. So now closed shape versus seam or crease shape. Two totally different things. When I draw and I visualize illustrations, I visualize closed shapes first and any detailed shapes on top of it that aren't closed. So I draw all closed shapes first, and then I add the detailed shapes on top of it. Hopefully that makes sense. That way, I'm closing in the shape first, and then I'm adding whatever dimensionality, creases, lines, detail art on top of it. That way, if I ever need to not have this, I always have the closed shape also, because so remember, these lines are just detail lines. Okay, so that brings me to the nostrils. You're going to notice that this is filled in black, which means this is a closed shape. I have nothing selected right now. I'm going to take my mouse and I'm going to go to the line where the nose is, the edge of the shape, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can really see what I'm doing. So now I'm going to click my mouse to make sure that my line starts so that it'll always be behind that line, right? So this is, think of this like the outline of the shape. And I'm going to go here and I'm going to click and pull my mouse to curve it. And now look what's happening. So I'm going to go down to my new line. So see where I re-meet to the line of the outline. I'm going to click and pull a little bit. And there is my nostril. Well, here's the problem. I need to close this shape, right? So this is an elbow. So I'm going to remove the forward anchor and I'm going to go over here and I'm going to click and hold my mouse down and look what it does. It tries to snap to my shape. You see that? I'm going to click and pull. And I'm going to let go. Now, I'm going to hide that shape for a minute just so that you can see. So you see how it goes outside of, you can actually see it right here. That shape actually goes a little bit outside of the nose shape. Remember, I'm using this to make fill shapes, not line art for stroke shapes. So the outside of the nose I drew first because it is a stroke shape. Now the shapes I'm drawing are all the fill shapes from that standpoint. So I'm going to select this and I'm going to switch it from a stroke to a fill. And this is called toggling the fill and stroke. Stroke, fill, stroke, fill. Now my shape doesn't go outside of the line because I made sure to draw it in the middle of the shape, knowing that the stroke would be on the outside of it and the fill would kind of be more to the inside of the shape I was drawing. So now I have a perfect shape for the nose. So I'm going to go over and do that to the same side over here. So let's do that again. I'm going to start on the line. I'm going to click and let go. I'm going to curve this a little bit. I'm going to go to where the line meets again. I'm going to drag it a little bit. I'm going to remove the forward anchor because it's an elbow. I'm going to go back over here and I'm going to click and drag. And you're going to see the green line. I'm staying inside my shape. I'm going to let it go. I'm going to select and deselect. So let's just hide it again to make sure this one I did a better job. It's not outside of the shape, but it's filled. So let's zoom out now. So now you can see the nose. One shape for the outside, a closed fill shape for the nostril, a closed fill shape for the nostril, and a pen tool curved line, two nodes that I didn't close. I just used the two pen tools for the nodes in order to create the seam. So now I've created the nose using one shape, two shapes, three shapes, and a line shape or a line stroke. So now I have my nose done. The beauty is I can always hide my shape. And you think anyone would guess that was Tony the Tiger's nose by just looking at that? Maybe actually, because it is kind of distinct. I bet when I draw this, someone might know what Tony the Tiger's nose is. Okay, so now I have my next shape, which is this one right here. And notice I'm only drawing line art. Outside full complete shapes and inside detailed black shapes, because that's still all part of line art, because line art, when you're doing like black outlines and black stripes and things like that, when you do a comic book, the line artist even draws the black line shapes if they're black, because they're all part of the primary silhouette or shape of the character. They pass that over to the colorist to fill in the color on anything that isn't black lined or a black stroke in the illustration. So, okay. So next is the nose. So let's figure out what we got going on here. This nose curves here because it matches up to there. And then it goes to here. There's some level of an elbow. it goes to here, some level of an elbow, curved arc, elbow, down to here, elbow, back to the corner, right? So from a brain standpoint, when I'm thinking, I need to start somewhere where there's an elbow. So either here, 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 or here. Yeah, I could start in the middle line, but that's kind of a weird place to start when I'm trying to draw this nose shape. I traditionally start where it touches another shape because I already know the point or the corner is right here, right? So I got to start my line there because I want the nose to be kind of seamless. So I'm going to start there. Now, here's something about knowing a little bit about the pen tool and illustration. If I go all the way to this corner and pull, actually, that's not too bad. It actually will follow that line pretty well because there's only a slight crease in there. Traditionally, if you did that, this would bow out a little bit more and it would make this perfect line curve here. If I was drawing this and I didn't happy accident do that, I actually would have clicked my mouse just short of this elbow and pulled. That way I had a bit of a curve to the beginning of my line before I started my next line. But this is actually a happy little accident because look at how that matches up almost seamlessly. So I'm going to go to this corner. I try to find kind of that middle area. I'm going to click and curve. I'm going to go back and remove that. Now, remember, this has a wrinkle to it. So I'm actually going to start it just short of there. Let's see what that looks like. And I'm going to pull it. Now watch, I'm trying to follow the bend of that nose because watch what happens when I follow down, follow down, follow down, follow down. Boy, it does a pretty good job of drawing that nose. So now you'll notice I clicked and I didn't pull, but I could get down here and click and pull a little bit and give that line a little bit more of a artwork arc after it inward curved. So now I'm a little bit better. Now I got a problem, right? Because I'm trying to make this an outline. And if I'm making an outline, these lines really got to kind of match up. You don't want that to bow in and out because it's not like a colored shape. I can hide behind another one. If this was just a colored shape, I would put the colored shape of the nose in front of the color shape of this bridge, and you would never see it because it would be behind it and hide it. But that's not the case because this line, so I'm going to click and pull, and here's where the art of practice comes into play. I've got to drop this thing right in the middle. And so now you can see that line, but look at the problem. This thing is way jagged out there. So let's see what we got going on with our stroke here. So that's round, that's middle cap, that's projected cap. So let's go back to there. See how that sticks out? So watch when I go to here and I go to here, nothing changes because it's the cap there. But when I go to the corner, this one makes that jagged edge. This one flattens it out. So look how it nicely matches now, and it doesn't have that little jagged edge. So now look at what's going on here. Let me see if I go to my layers and hide my template. I'm getting close to enough for people to be like, damn, that's Tony the Tiger, right? I'm getting close to that. Now, you're going to notice that, look, oh, I'm not exactly to the top of his head there. So if my type A personality really kicked in, I would use my direct select, pull that up a little bit, get that closer to the top, still too high. Move that down a little bit. That's the beauty about direct select. I could move this thing however I need to because it's a closed shape, right? Now, so let's go. And just for the sake of the process, I'm going to do the outside of his head because the eyebrows are actually on top of the outside of the head because of the way the head is. It actually curves down there, and the eyebrows, you know, when it looks like the illustration, they raise the eyebrows up. Well, depending on the perspective, the raised eyebrows actually look above the head in a character because they're sticking up a little bit. I think the next thing I need to do is I need to draw the outside of Tony's head. Then I can add all the little fun details on the inside, like the eyebrows and his ears and everything else. But do know that the ears are detached from the head. That's important because that's part of his personality. They curl up, they flatten out. So I don't want to make my shape go here and loop up because the ears are detached. They're a part of the head. So visually, you should see that the head curves and that these ears are detached. So let's zoom in just a skosh. I can use my space bar and always pan. So I really do that a lot because I want to be able to pan as I'm drawing because I can't see all of the shape. So I'm going to start here with Tony. I'm going to move my mouse and click and drag. And I'm going to move it to here and click and drag. And I'm going to move it to here. Now I know how to use the pen tool pretty well. So I kind of know where I have to go to start the next point because I've drawn with the pen tool a lot. So if I click and drag here, I know I have to remove that anchor because this is a curve on his chin. Then I have to remove the anchor. That's a curve on his chin. I also know his chin's rounded. So if I do this, I know it's going to curve where I need it to curve, and then remove the front anchor and then go to the next spot, curve it, remove the front anchor, go to his cheeks here, start just in front of the curve because I know the pen tool is going to want to curve, which you can see right there. So now if I pull it that way, it's going to curve back. I've been using the pen tool for many, many years. So I know where I have to go in the shape in order to create the right shape. And so then I'll just flatten out the outline. And so now you can see if I hide the illustration, I have the beginning of the outline of a shape. And that's really important because every stripe, just like in his nose, is a separate shape. The interior white of his face is a separate shape. That's actually an orange shape with a white shape overlaid on top of it. And if you look closely, it has a gray stroke to the outside of the white shape, and the head has a brown stroke on the outside of it. So visually, I see everything in cut paper. Each shape that has a different color is a different piece of construction paper cut out, stacked on top of each other. Think of it like DuPont stickers, one shape on top of the next shape, on top of the next shape, on top of the next shape. The tongue is a shape sitting on top of the silhouette, which is the mouth. So everything is stacked on top of each other. Now, just for the sake of the process, I'm going to deselect and I'm going to do his ears, just so that you can see that this ear is a separate shape. So I'm going to pull that. And now I'm going to pull that. Now look at that. Now to me, that would be an awesome shape because it curls out and curves back in and it gives it a really fluid shape. But it's not a great job following the template, right? That's a real fluid shape. So if you actually looked at that, you'll be like, wow, that's a great looking ear. Look how that swoops and it's clean, but it's not following Tony's image that I was using. So I'm going to go back again. I'm going to find it and I'm going to curve this line and I'm going to curve this line. I'm following the middle of it, right? So I'm going to curve this line. And the reason I stop there is because you'll notice the ear wiggles in ever so slightly. I'm going to go back to that shape, click and drag, go back to the middle. Let's zoom in. I got to zoom in because this thing bows out ever so slightly. So you see that? I want to make sure that that matches. Zoom out. So there's his ear. Let's go to the next one. Zoom, zoom, zoom. Use my pen tool. So hopefully from this lecture, you're seeing all the little minute areas that I'm thinking about as I am tracing the silhouette, because your book spends a fair amount of time tracing different templates it gives you. Zoom, 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 zoom. Get in here. Now, if you weren't tracing this in Tony the Tiger and you were actually just creating a tiger, right? So you can see it here. You know, you can really see Tony now. I mean, Tony is coming into full shape here. All right, zoom in. So I'm going to add the details to his ear, the little sprout of hair here, and I'm going to do his mouth, and then we're going to fill some coloring in just so that we kind of close the loop here. So now the seam, I could start here or I could start here to draw this little seam for the ear. Now, you should notice it's thicker at the bottom and thinner at the top. That's called the width tool in Illustrator. So if I was drawing and I'm learning best practice, start at the thick, end in the thin, because this is actually the width tool that they're using in their program in order to make that line look tapered. When I drew in my sketchbook growing up, I would draw this not as a line stroke, I would draw it as a shape. So I would make this thing like a V, and then I would fill the V in. Well, now Illustrator has the width tool, and it makes the life a lot easier. So I'm going to go there. I'm going to click and drag. Remember, once I have the line, deselect. I'm going to go to this one, go back, click my mouse at the beginning of that shape, go to the end, click and drag, go back, deselect. Also remember this line has a cap, right? So if I was doing this correctly, I would round the edge because this is a pen tool that tapers and I want that edge to be rounded. Now, you'll notice a little sprout of hair at the top. I could either make this a V with the pen tool in one stroke, or I could start at the base, draw this sprig of hair, deselect, go back to the base, draw this thickness of hair. The width tool works where you can taper the line anywhere. But because I know that this is only one sprig of hair, I'm going to do it as an inverted V. So I'm going to click and drag, go back to the middle, remove, go back to this end, click and drag. And then I'm going to deselect and make sure the cap is rounded, which it is. All right, so same for the whiskers, same for the little curve in the crease, same for under the eyeballs, everything the same, right? Now, you'll notice the eyeballs are nice rounded shapes. That's because they use the ellipse tool. So the ellipse tool is exactly what it sounds like. If I click and drag, it makes an ellipse. If I select that ellipse, it gives me the ability to scale and rotate. So look what I'm able to do. Rotate, 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 stretch it out. And there is the eyeball. Super easy to do when you have simple shapes. So if I use my ellipse tool again, click and drag a circle, use my selection arrow to move it. I can rotate it. I can stretch it. I can do everything I need to get this eyeball to be exactly the way I need it to be. So let's zoom in. Squish it a little bit. Elongate it a little bit. Rotate it a little bit. Use my arrow keys. His eyeball. So anything that is a circle or a rectangle, you'll notice this little white dot. I'm going to draw it with the ellipse tool, but you actually don't outline this. You don't black line it because it's a highlight on the eye. So that's actually a fill color. The color guy does that, guy or girl, not the black line art person. But just for the sake of you seeing what it looks like, it's that little shape right there. And so I'll make it white just so you can see it, but that's actually part of the color layer, not part of the black line layer. But I just did that because it's a circle shape and it's really easy. And so in theory, I could do that. And then you could really get an idea for the eyeball. But line art is for anything black filled in. The color layer is for any color that you're adjusting with it. Okay, so I have the basic ears and stuff. I'm just going to do the mouth just so that you can see. Everybody should be kind of seeing the gist of this thing now. So I'm going to curve this out a little bit. And I'm going to curve it back a little bit. And I'm going to drop. Oh, I'm going to drop it right here. I'm going to go back here and curve it a little bit. Now look, it's a fill, not a stroke. I can't see the template. Switch it. Sorry, I tapped my mouse. Switch it. Remove that. Remember, that's an elbow. Go to there. Go to there. Back up to there. Right? So the pen tool is practice, practice, practice. Because look, now I go here, click. I go back to where it meets. I curve the line. I deselect. There's the next spot. Start here. I can start here. Go to where it touches so it turns green. So I know that it's a perfect spot. Curve it. Go to select it, deselect. So look at how this thing is taking shape. Go to the prop, go to the layers. I'm going to hide that, and now you can really see Tony is starting to take shape. Now, why is all this process important? Because now I have my line art layer, I have my template layer. So now let's just say I wanted to start filling in the shapes, right? Start filling in the shapes. So I know a couple of things. The nose is blue. The bridge of the nose is like an orange color. So I'm just going to do those two things so you can see what the line art looks like. So I'm actually going to select the bridge of the nose and hold down shift and select the actual nose part. So you see how I have them selected together? I held down shift to do that. I'm going to do edit, copy, or command C, right? So I'm going to do edit, copy, or command C. Now remember, I'm on the line art layer. So I'm going to lock the line art layer. I'm going to go to the color overlay layer, and I'm going to unlock that layer. So I selected the line art, I did edit, copy. Then I locked the line art and went to the color overlay, because I can do what's called paste in place. And that's going to allow me to put a shape directly in the exact same spot of the line art, but put it in the color overlay. So I'm going to paste in place. Now, this thing is the shape in the color overlay, and this shape is the thing in the color overlay. So watch what happens when I pick that. And instead of making it a stroke, I'm going to fill it in orange. So whatever color orange, doesn't really matter. And so now you can see line art and fill color. So now watch. Let's go back here. Let's select the nose. Let's make it a fill. Remember, I'm in the color overlay, not in the line art. I'm just going to drop it in there. And so now you can see line art and you can see fill. So I don't know, do you want to be the line art guy or girl, or do you want to be the fill guy or girl? Because honestly, that is a job in a lot of industries. Someone that is really good at drawing and someone who's really good at color theory, which is what this is. So line art, I'm going to lock color overlay, go back to line art because I want to copy this. I'm going to lock the line art. I'm going to go back to the color overlay, and I'm going to do edit, paste in place. Remember, that's a shape now in the exact same place. I'm going to fill it in black. So I have the mouth outlined. I have the mouth colored in. So everything has a shape. So let's do that again. Lock the color overlay, go back to the line art, and I'm going to select the ears. I'm going to hold down shift and select both ears, do edit, copy, or command C, lock the line art, go back to the color overlay layer, do edit, paste in place. And instead of a stroke, I'm going to do a fill of white. And it's literally, I'm connecting the dots. Lock the color overlay, go back to the line art, select this eyeball, copy it, lock the line art, go to the color overlay, unlock it, edit, paste in place. Change it from a stroke to a fill, make it light yellow, because it looks like his eyeball is kind of like a light yellow. Line art, color overlay. And I got to tell you, the color overlay looks like a train wreck without the line art, right? Once you turn the line art on, that's just color overlay. All of a sudden, it's like, wow, look at that, right? Line art, color overlay, separate layers. That way you can always have only line art, because there's going to be a place for that. And there's going to be a place for line art with fill, color fill. So line art's, too many designers create where they create this entire thing as shapes and they fill in the color on all the shapes. And honestly, there are times that you need line art without color overlay, just like that. So this is really good best practice. So for your homework, you're going to start with those little basic step-by-step little template drawings. But really, the best way you get really good at something is to just take an image, an illustration, a character, a logo, something, a symbol, something that you appreciate, you like, and outline it with a layer and fill in the color with a layer and do as many closed shapes as you can to encase this illustration so that everything kind of has its parts and its places. So you've got a couple of chapters in your book. You have an out of book project this week, which is to create a couple of little icons for fictitious programs, fictitious apps. You can doodle them on paper if you like, or you can create them with a rough sketch in Illustrator. Either way is appropriate because we're learning the process of creating closed shapes and eventually closing those closed shapes in with color. So your out of book can either be a doodle sketch digitally or on paper, or you can use the pencil, the paintbrush, the pen tool in Illustrator and do the same sketches digitally, whatever you're comfortable with. But your process is just learning to doing basic digital tools, pen tool, paintbrush, and pencil. Your book does a really good job of it. I try to let you be inspired by as many things as possible. So if you really like a particular thing, maybe like growing up, you thought, I don't know, the Lucky Charms guy on the cereal box was like a cool character. I'm okay with you finding an image of the Lucky Charm character from the box, using it like we're doing this lecture, and tracing the Lucky Charm guy and giving it to me for the chapters in your book. Because the chapters in your book have you trace like the most simple things. It's a clock and it's like simple little shapes. So if you want to do what we're doing in our lecture, whether it be Tony the Tiger or any illustration character, you may give those to me as your in-book learning the basic drawing techniques. But keep in mind, you do have a vocabulary quiz for your chapters. So even though I'll let you do a digital illustration that maybe is a little more inspiring, please make sure you're reading the book, highlighting the book, taking the quiz, because you need to learn the terms for all of these things that are part of the process. But I also want to leave it open-ended enough so that you are inspired by what you're creating in class. So you could see the beginning of my Tony the Tiger. Yes, we could talk about Pantone colors, using consistent colors, start using the gradient tool, which is what these colors are in his body. It's a gradient where it fades from light to darker orange. All those things are done in digital illustration class. So the lecture is about an hour and 40 minutes. I'm gonna end the recorded part of the lecture. It looks like I have a little chat thing that's popped up in the window. So I'm gonna keep that on and chat a little bit. I wanna end the recording so that anyone that's watching the recording, they don't have too much overwhelming to watch. I want to keep it to a good amount of time for them to do an hour and 40 minutes or so. So let me end the recording and my desktop share, and then I'll pop in for some chats if anyone has any questions or anything as we go along here. And I look forward to your guys' submissions.